Tracking the Silverliners, Volume 2. Today is April 27th, 2001, and we're in Glenside, Pennsylvania, on the former Reading Company system tracks. Glenside is at a junction where the Warminster branch diverges from the Lansdale-Doylestown line, and that junction is west of the Glenside station at Carmel Junction. What you're looking at is a former Pennsylvania Railroad late liner built by the St. Louis Car Company. It's being used on the airport service from here to Philadelphia Airport. And you'll notice that this SEPTA consist, like all others, have been painted in a new snazzy rainbow color. These cars are nicknamed late liners because they were delivered late to the railroad. The St. Louis Car Company had little experience in stainless steel car bodies, so they were forever nicknamed late liners from then on. They're unusual in that the locomotive controls are on the left side instead of the right side. And we see these late liners pulling up to the Glenside station to load passengers heading for Philadelphia Airport. Philadelphia was about the first city in the United States that had a direct heavy rail link to an airport from downtown. We're not including rapid transit in this analysis. And that train is heading down the line. Its next stop will be at Jenkintown, where it joins up with the West Trenton line. At 9:33 a.m. we see an R2 Warminster local passing the home signal of Carmel Junction. He's negotiating the switch to head up north towards Hatboro and Warminster. At 9:45 we see an R5 train from Malvern. No longer terminates at Paoli. The yard at Paoli is closed for SEPTA. A new yard was built west of Paoli at Fraser. Trains now go 1 mile beyond Paoli and terminate at Malvern, then they head into the yard. And the home signal at Carmel Junction indicates the approach of an R5 train going straight iron on the main. This line used to be the old Reading Company Bethlehem branch, once used by Bud RDC trains as far as Bethlehem up until the early 80s. Now it's all electric. Most trains go on the Lansdale and then entering the branch there to head to Doylestown. 9:48 a.m. we see an R5 train heading to Doylestown, passing the home signal at Carmel Junction. That was a train of 4 Silverliner 4 cars, the most common MU equipment on SEPTA. There are 3 different types. The Silverliner 2s, which are the old Bud-built Silverliners delivered to the Reading and the Pennsy in 1963. The Silverliner 3s are the late liners delivered around 1967 to the Pennsy, and then all subsequent orders are Silverliner 4s. Some operate in tandems of 2 cars, and some of them operate singly. And 9:55, we have an R1 airport-bound train that came down from Warminster. And what we have here is an airport train that terminates here at Glenside. He's doing a few reverse moves to get into the pocket track to wait for his next departure. Right near here is the Willow Grove Naval Air Station, and a lot of big planes take off and land from this facility. And this airport train is moved up to the switch. He's waiting for the switch to be thrown so he can enter the station here at Glenside and head for the airport. And you'll note he left a car behind. And west of Glenside Station, we are at Carmel Interlocking. You can clearly see the line separating. Off to the right is the line up towards Hatboro and Warminster, and off to the left is the line to Lansdale and Doylestown. The Warminster branch is new. Well, the branch is not new, but the station at Warminster is fairly new. It wasn't until the early 70s that the Warminster station was opened. Up until that point, the terminus on this line was at Hatboro. At 10:40 a.m. we see an R2 train negotiating the junction and heading up to Warminster. At 10:58 a.m. we have an R2 train coming down from Warminster, about to enter the main line here at CP Carmel. And we're now further south towards Philly on the Reading electrified lines at Elkins Park. We're just south of Jenkintown, where the West Trenton line R3 trains join up with the main. This is on a very busy stretch of track. At this location, you have 10 trains passing through here in an hour during the weekdays. But the only trains that stop here are the R1 airport trains in both directions. At each end of the station platforms here, you have a signal, and they are approach lit, warning you of any imminent movements. At 11:40 a.m. that was an R3 train en route from West Trenton to Elwyn, just west of Media, on the old Pennsy side of the division. At 11:41, there we had a train of original silverliners delivered to the Bud Company in 1963. This quaint village of Elkins Park and the green pastures around it, the green trees, it's hard to believe it's only 9 miles from downtown Philadelphia. "12:06 p.m. we have an R1 train approaching Elkins Park, where he'll be making a stop, heading for the airport. You can see a very distinct similarity between this station building and the old Reading station at Lebanon, Pennsylvania, with its stone structure and steeple. And we're now about a mile south of Elkins Park on the main at Melrose Park. We're just north of the Philadelphia city limits. Service through here is much the same as in Elkins Park. Mostly R1 trains stop here, every half hour in each direction. In 1252, that southbound had a late liner and 3 silverliners, the original Bud-built cars. And at 1:05 p.m., right on time, we have an R1 local to Philadelphia and Philadelphia International Airport. And here comes another southbound local on the R1 to Philadelphia and the airport. And here's the first of 3 express trains in succession. Time is 1:41 p.m. This is an R5 train. And that was a train of Silverliner 2 equipment, all 3 of them. For cars that are almost 40 years old, they still have a lot of energy. They can still accelerate rapidly and go at high speed. And that train was actually consisting of a late liner sandwiched in between 2 original Bud-built Silverliners. We're further south on the main line, served by the R2s, R3s, and R5s, at a very important station, the Fern Rock Transportation Center. We're just south of the Philadelphia city limits and inside the city of Philadelphia. The Fern Rock Transportation Center serves all trains. Everything stops here. And this is also a connection to the Broad Street subway. The northern terminus of that subway is located here at Fern Rock. In fact, the Fern Rock station of the Broad Street subway is the only station on the subway that's outdoors. Everything else is underground. And you're looking at some of the Kawasaki subway cars that are in service on the Broad Street subway, with the Philadelphia skyline in the background. These are Kawasaki-built subway cars delivered in the mid-1980s, which replaced an ancient fleet of Brill cars, the old red cars. They had loud, grinding traction motors on them, and they were real fan favorites, but not really a favorite with the commuters. And there's one of the old red cars right there. Philadelphia has a few cars that they use for historic trips. Old Bridge Line cars and some of the old Broad Street subway cars. About 15 years or more ago, the Broad Street subway was a sorry sight. It had dark, dimly lit stations, low patronage, plus the old cars didn't exactly add any security to the area. But these new cars, when they were delivered, around the same time that the new stations were getting new lighting, and now business on the Broad Street subway is quite good. And here we have a subway train that just came out of the tunnel and is heading into the terminal. The Fern Rock Transportation Center has quite a story to it, actually. This wasn't always here, this big station. Originally there was a much smaller station here, rather insignificant, not that many trains stopped here. But a funny thing happened, something called Railworks. About 10 or 12 years ago, Railworks was put into effect, which was a project that rebuilt bridges close to downtown Philadelphia on the Reading Company side. And they had to take the line out of service while this work was undertaken. And they could not run trains into the city from the Reading side of the system. So a solution had to be found. How could passengers ride from Reading Company suburban points via an all-rail routing to downtown Philadelphia? And the solution was here at Fern Rock. At Fern Rock, you have a connection with the Broad Street subway. So SEPTA decided to build a much larger, high-capacity station here to connect with the Broad Street subway, so passengers coming in from the outlying suburbs could get off trains here, get on the Broad Street subway, and go downtown. So during the RailWorks project, this station was an extremely busy one. Lots of people changed trains here. But once RailWorks was completed and the bridges were finished, this station became a lot less busy. But it's still a significant station on the railroad, and still is a good connection between the regional rail system and the Broad Street subway. I've had the pleasure of riding on those subway cars on the Broad Street subway. They had loud grinding traction motors, as I mentioned earlier. They had peanut whistles similar to Penzie MP54s, and when they accelerated down the track, they made quite a sound. At 2:35 p.m. we have a southbound heading for Philadelphia, stopping at Fern Rock. At 2:44 p.m. we have another southbound arriving at Fern Rock. We're now on the R5 line of SEPTA. This is also the main line, the former Pennsylvania Railroad main line between Philadelphia, Harrisburg, Pittsburgh, and Chicago. We're at the Dalesford station, the last station before arriving at Paoli. We're going to catch the PM rush hour at various locations on the main line in the Paoli area. This is a very important line with a very important history. This was the first electrified line that the Pennsylvania Railroad built in the early 20th century with overhead catenary. And you'll notice the catenary poles here are a bit primitive looking, not like other catenary poles that the Pennsylvania Railroad built in succeeding years. It's a busy line used by frequent SEPTA service from Philadelphia to Malvern, out to Parksburg, and also Amtrak service between New York, Philadelphia, and Harrisburg, and a couple of Amtrak trains like the Three Rivers and the Pennsylvanian, which run from Philadelphia to Chicago. The Three Rivers comes down from New York and then proceeds west to Chicago from Philadelphia. It's a 4-track main, sees quite a bit of service. .358, we have an R5 towards Philadelphia. Our location is further west on the main line at Paoli. You're looking at Paoli Tower, which is still open, controls the switches around here. A lot has changed in Paoli over the years. It's no longer the terminal for the local train, the legendary Paoli Local. The local now terminates in Malvern most of the time, with some going to Downingtown. And the storage yard at Paoli is no longer here. A new yard was built west of Malvern at Fraser. There's the old yard office, all boarded up, no longer in use. The area behind the tower that's vacant is the area where the yard tracks once were. The switch you see going off to the left ahead there is where the switchback for westbounds ended, where they join the main line to head into the station here. Although this is no longer the terminal for the legendary Paoli Local of old, it's still a busy place. The station is served by both SEPTA and Amtrak. We're going to catch the evening rush hour here at Paoli. It can be a very entertaining ordeal here. You can see just about any kind of motive power that SEPTA runs through here during this time, including their electric locomotives. They have a fleet of AEM 7s and one ALP 44. That in addition to Amtrak's Keystone services, which stop here regularly. And right on time, we see Amtrak 656, the Keystone service, en route from Harrisburg to Philadelphia to New York City. Pulled by a Genesis diesel, he'll swap that out for an AEM 7 at 30th Street. Unlike years ago, trains between Harrisburg and New York go via 30th Street. In Pennsy days, they bypassed 30th Street and made their only Philadelphia stop in North Philadelphia. From there, they headed west through the Pittsburgh subway at Zoo Interlocking. That was a tunnel that connected the line from New York to the line to Harrisburg. Today, the Pittsburgh subway is only used for turning of equipment. And 4:27 p.m. That's a Malvern to Philadelphia local. Back in Pennsylvania Railroad days, a lot of freight trains ran through here. Paoli's at the summit of a grade, and trains would often require pushers to get to this location. 4:44 p.m., here comes train 9547, an express train from Philadelphia to Thorndale. And that train clattering away towards Philadelphia on the jointed rail that's still on that one track is a train that runs from Thorndale to Lansdale. That's quite a long distance. In fact, some trains run from Thorndale to Doylestown. That's about as far a distance as you can travel on a SEPTA train. And at 5:01 p.m., approaching is Amtrak train 647, Keystone service en route from New York to Philadelphia to Harrisburg. And at 5:19 p.m. approaching is a local from Philadelphia to Malvern. Looks like it's got some silverliner equipment on it, the older types. And on April 27th, 2001, the Pennsylvania Railroad lives. Every one of those cars belonged to the Pennsylvania Railroad at one time. The first and third car were late liners by St. Louis Car Company, and the middle car was a former Pennsy silverliner built by Budd Company, 1963. And at 5:25 p.m. approaching is SEPTA train 7555. It's called a limited on the timetable, runs out of Suburban Station in Philadelphia, stops at 30th Street, and runs express to Wayne, and then all stops to Thorndale. And this train looks like it has some original silverliner equipment. And approaching at 5:44 p.m. is SEPTA train 9559, another limited en route from Philadelphia to Thorndale. This train is powered by an AEM-7 electric locomotive and Bombardier coaches. The time is 5:57. That was a local en route from Malvern into Philadelphia. This is actually train 584, and it's one of those super long distance SEPTA trains. Actually runs from Thorndale all the way to Doylestown. And we have an arriving local for Malvern. And at 6 o'clock we have a westbound Amtrak Keystone service train for Harrisburg running around a deadhead train that dropped off its last passengers at Bryn Mawr, and he'll be heading west empty, waiting for him to clear. This is train 649 en route from New York to Philadelphia to Harrisburg. At 6:07 p.m. that train had two late liners on the front and 2 former Reading Company silverliners on the rear. When they were sent to the railroad, they were numbered in the 9000s, and they're still numbered in the 9000s. And it gets busy around here at rush hour time. That's Amtrak train 652, Keystone service en route from Harrisburg to Philadelphia to New York. It's 6:11 p.m. Approaching is the hottest SEPTA commuter train through here. Train 7565. On the timetable, it's listed as the Great Valley Express. Runs out of Suburban Station downtown Philadelphia, stops at 30th Street, and then goes nonstop to Paoli, and then local stops to Thorndale. This train is being powered by an electric locomotive, looks like another AEM-7. He's switching from the express track to the local track to make his station stop at Paoli. On his way out here, he ran around a local train en route from Philadelphia to Malvern. SEPTA is one of several operators that has AEM-7s on the roster. The other railroads are, of course, Amtrak and MARC around Baltimore and Washington, D.C. New Jersey Transit has similar units called ALP-44s, and they're getting ALP-46s delivered. In fact, the Massachusetts Bay Transportation Authority is considering buying something similar to an AEM-7 now that Amtrak is electrified between Providence and Boston. They may use those locomotives on Boston to Attleboro to Providence locals. And we're now further west on the main line at Malvern. Malvern is 1 mile west of Paoli. This is the end of the line for most trains, but the train runs empty further west to Fraser, and then it changes direction and comes back. And time is 6:30 p.m. That was the train that the Great Valley Express ran around. That train actually terminates here at Malvern, but it's running light to the Fraser storage yard. I mentioned earlier about how Philadelphia to Paoli was the original overhead wire line of the Pennsylvania Railroad and how it had primitive catenary poles. Working west beyond Paoli, you'll note that the catenary poles take on a more traditional Pennsylvania Railroad look. And at 6:51 p.m. we have an express train on SEPTA from Philadelphia to Thorndale. This train also has an electric locomotive pulling it.